My name's Doug Holloway, and I'd like to tell you about this project. It's called the Lake House. I started working on the project in 2022 with concept ideas, and we're now in 2025 and the project is nearing completion. When I came to see the site, I was struck by how naturally beautiful it was. It was a barn conversion that was set very near to a lake, a very large lake. There was broad-leaved woodlands and meadows surrounding the property. It was obvious from the beginning that this wanted to be a place which really referenced the natural environment. It was very important for the client. The client used to use this barn as an office, and I remember meeting after meeting where he would make reference to things in the wild landscape, either animals that he'd seen or birds, or he'd talk about flowers that were flowering at different times of the year. And you know, that sense of wanting the wild to influence the concept was kind of there, and that's kind of how I like to work. You know, not necessarily in a very specific listed way, but also taking influence from what feels like very important things to the client and letting those influence the concept. I added a concept to the brief, this idea of spiralling. And the idea really came from spending time on the site. That's something that I do quite a lot. I found it to be a very beautiful space, and I was always noticing small details. The fact that the space felt very wild. Just spending time in the space, you could see that there was details in the water, the way that the water flowed in eddies and spiraled into whirlpools. The way that there were dust devils in the landscape when the sun shone and the wind blew off the hills, and you'd see these tornadoes, these small tornadoes kind of picking up leaves and kind of spiraling their way around the site, and then just the wind coming off the hills. There was just this sense of spiraling kind of in the place. I suppose it was an esoteric feeling that was inside of me, but I added this concept to some of the original concept drawings, and the client liked it. And we just kind of went from there, and this idea of spiralling became quite an important conceptual idea for the garden. In any large landscape, there are certain things which you need to do. So one of the most important things is you need to have an entrance. Because we were working in a space that was so wild, and because the concept had already been influenced by this spiralling, I was hesitant to design a large gated entrance to the property, and that it didn't feel right. And we had another practical issue, that the meadow was considerably higher than the height of the house. So we knew we wanted to create this entrance area and driveway, and then this idea for this kind of sweeping wall came through in the concept, and then that combined with the idea of the entrance gates. It all clicked into place, really. Suddenly there was this idea that this wall could go into a kind of a tighter spiral. So there was this sense of very loose kind of curving lines that flowed around almost naturally in the landscape. And I thought a sense of entrance could come from some repetition and some formality, which I thought could be represented in trees. And then we wanted to plant across a lot of the landscape native trees, and I had this idea for Acer campestre, which is a native tree. It's fairly small, it has a beautiful elegant habit, and I had this idea that these Acer campestres could repeat on either side of the gate and be inside of these spirals. And so suddenly there was this concept which kind of like a spine that was moving through the landscape, and we designed it and built it, and then you could see this spine appearing in the landscape, like we were building the actual foundations of the concept in the space. And from that, we could build the layers of the landscape piece by piece.